Hi guys. I hope that you're having a good week. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm also sorry about the extra day. Thanks for everyone was okay with that. I appreciate that. It is hard when you transition schools because you always get a new version of sickness that you haven't had yet because you're always adjusting to whatever the new germs are. So I'm a little under the weather. So I'm definitely going to ensure that what I am talking about in the lecture today is the most important information. And then some of those things I'll just let you read on your own, just so that you have to hear me talking forever. I am, however, going to start our lecture today off with a better explanation, just a better explanation of the paper that's going to be due soon. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the syllabus. I'm sharing my screen. I know last week I started talking about it, and I just don't think it was a very clear discussion. So I just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So today is 9/16. So we are in week 5. I hope that you feel like the class is going by really quickly. I certainly do. I think you guys are doing a really nice job interacting with the content. Many people have already turned in the Bruce paper and the lecture for this week. Again, I am going to move that day for both of those to the 20th, just because I'm giving you the content a day late. So those can be due Sunday by midnight. Next week, we'll talk about trauma-sensitive educational settings. And then the week after that, on 10/3, so October 3rd, you are going to be submitting your research paper specific for the Bruce Perry text. So again, week 7, you won't have an individual reflection over one chapter. You'll be submitting your paper. So let's go ahead and take a look. And again, that also backs right up into fall break. So that'll be a nice little get your paper done, enjoy your fall break. Let's go ahead and take a look quickly at the assignment. So it is worth 50 points. It's due on October 3rd. You're going to select 2 of the read Bruce Perry chapters. So 2 of the chapters that we've already read, and then you're going to go in and complete an additional in-depth analysis over that. So I think where my confusion was last week was the pages and the amount of chapters. So it can be like, my expectation is minimum this should be a 4-page paper. If you are really passionate about your chapter and you end up going over that, of course, that's fine. Please don't submit to me anything over like 8 pages. That would be too much for this assignment. So essentially what you're doing is selecting two of the cases in this book, 2 chapters that you find really interesting. And if I were you, and I'm breaking this down in my brain here, if it's 4 pages is the minimum and I'm doing 2 different chapters, I would have a page that explains the child and the situation, and then a page that talks about then what are the effects of this, the research, the reaction, the diagnosis. So kind of like a 2-page paper situation per chapter. So you're taking the information that you got, but you're also then adding 2 to 3 peer-reviewed journals for the assignment. 2 to 3 is really easy. It's essentially like we're doing 2 chapters. So if you can find one additional source to cite with both of your chapters, then you're going to be good to go. This should be done in APA format. If you need any help with APA format, I would highly recommend PurdueOwl.com. There's a section on there where you can go into APA and it shows you exactly what the paper layout should look like. And then again, this is also still a reflection, so you can use personal pronouns in it. I'm looking for you to interact with the content at a really high level. So I hope that is a better breakdown for you. Again, I would pick the 2 chapters that were the most interesting to you, and then continue on from there. Again, just talking about the child, the effects that whatever happened to the child when they were younger, how that's affecting them now. What did Bruce Perry suggest? Did it work? Things like that. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. The next other assignment that you'll have coming up is that film reflection that'll be due at the end of October. This is a 3-page reflection paper after watching the movie Room. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that. I'm going to go back to my original meeting, and now I'm going to share our PowerPoint and our lecture for the week. Awesome. Cool. So this week's topic is going to be children with the backdrop of war. I know many of you have actually already submitted your Bruce Perry reflection, which is awesome. This one is really interesting with cuteness and self-soothing. Why is being held and touched literally a necessity for children? Such an interesting chapter. And then why is it traumatic for children to transition between sets of loving caregivers? And then what can we do to help children who have gone through several such transitions? So kind of a smaller load of questions this week, but still make sure that you are citing information from the text. This is like the clearest way to tell me that you are participating in the content and reading the book by citing things, talking about direct quotes, direct pieces of information that are in that Bruce Perry text, using links and things that are cited in the lectures and in the modules. That's always going to get you a great grade on these reflections. So our topic is children against the backdrop of war. Personally, before I went to college, I didn't have any family, close family that was in the military. And so I just didn't come from an upbringing that had a great understanding of military culture. And so some of the things I'm going to say to you today, especially if you come from a military background, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is so easy today. That completely understand. I've heard this a million times. But if you're more like me, some of these things might be new to you. And I kind of want you to think of the grand scheme of when you are helping someone, or specifically if you're working with a child and they have this backdrop of war, whether you're actually working with a child that experienced war, or you're working with a child whose parents have been serving in a war their whole lives, you have to have this generalized understanding of military culture to best have great conversations with that kid, to be able to help them at the highest level and to understand the things that they're going through. So since 9/11, more than 2 million troops have been deployed. There's lots of little like OIF, OEF. I have the acronyms and then what it stands for down here. But this is the only slide that will be completely referred to. 73% of active duty soldiers have been deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan. So from 2001 to December 2014, we've had soldiers in Afghanistan. From January 2015 to present day, we've had people working for the Operation Freedom Sentinel in Afghanistan. From March 2003 to August 2010, we had people in Iraq. And continuing that OIF through the December process of 2011, we also had Operation New Dawn Iraq, and then OIR, October 2014 to present, Inherent Resolve Iraq. I'm not going to get into deep military policy today or what has been happening in these wars, because that's really not what we are looking to analyze. We're looking to analyze the effects of just generalized military culture, war, fighting, things like that, and then how that affects the child and what we can do to best support them. Dual career families are norm, and the norm is leaving children impacted by the deployment of both parents. So it's normalized if both parents in the military have been impacted and they've been deployed, that child is going to have a lot of trauma and a lot of alone time that they're going to have to sort through. Half of all service members are married. 470,000 children are affected by their parents' deployments. And then we'll talk about TBI and PTSD. TBI stands for traumatic brain injury, and PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. These are both extremely common in people that served in war. Obviously, the things that you can see in these situations are just undescribable atrocities, and it's very difficult for our brains to process this, even as adults, especially as adults. And so it changes and alters the way your brain is wired, how you react. And simple things like that become not so simple quickly when you have to still raise a child. So looking at, again, this slide is like really just trying to get you introduced like jargon, military related jargon. So if someone is an Army man, they're a soldier. If they're in the Air Force, they're an airman. Navy is seamen and sailors. If they're in the Marine Corps, they're in the Marines. The Coast Guard is members of the Coast Guard. You have enlisted personnel versus officers. The higher ranking that you go, an officer is one of the higher ranked positions. Enlistment happens because of family tradition, the benefits, the great equalizer, and then escape from the world they know. So when you think about why do people enlist in the military, a huge trend is if you have someone in your family that has served in the military, it comes up significantly more in conversations about the future than if you do not have someone in your family that participated in the military. A lot of that familial tradition runs deep, and hey, I served in this branch and I think that would be great for you as well. Benefits, the military will will give you decent benefits. Many people, especially having worked in 8th grade and spent some time in a high school teaching, many students just think college is too expensive. And if they go and serve for a few years, then they know their college is paid off. And so, again, many people take advantage of the military specifically for the benefits. The idea of the great equalizer in joining in the military is very interesting to me, because essentially, like, you could be coming from a really wealthy family, you could be coming from a family that really struggled financially, all across the United States. But when you get to training camp, you're all treated the same and you all have the same expectation. And when you leave, you have a certain set of skills that you've developed, and essentially, like, you're equalized. So again, if you're coming from someone that is maybe had a really difficult financial upbringing, maybe struggled to have your basic necessities met, going to the military could be a great way to kind of equalize or create a level playing field as you continue on in your life. And then I think that also connects them to the escape from the world they know. Again, talking to a lot of specifically young men in rural Texas when I was teaching there, a lot of them really wanted to join the Marines specifically because they knew they lacked structure. They came from a home that was not structured and they need that routine, and they didn't feel like they could enter adulthood without having someone explicitly teach that 24/7, which the military is definitely a great place to learn those skills. There's an authoritarian structure. The military itself is not a democracy. While America runs in a democracy, the military does not. You have to follow the rules. There is a hierarchy. There's someone that's in charge, and the orders go from there. And whatever your commander, your officer, whatever your boss tells you to do, you have to get that job done. The military values a class system, as per said, a sense of mission, loyalty, dedication, pride, and then also just this idea of always being prepared for disaster and death. Definitely a lot of people that leave the military afterwards, you can tell in everyday life that they kind of have that preparation mindset, and kind of just an understand of what to do if something negative or an issue were to occur. They kind of already have that ingrained in them from their time in the military. So different types of military families, as we're leaving the category of more specific military and war-related facts and now kind of entering into how do we work with children. So military men. So men can be deployed in America. And if a man is just deployed, men and women can be deployed. Men can be drafted in America. And so if there was ever an issue where we did not have enough people volunteering in our military, this would create a whole other layer of potential trauma that we would have to work through as a country. But both men and women can face deployment. But if a man is deployed, then now the wife has to care for the children and all of the household responsibilities. Deployment can happen on very little notice. And so what looks like a very typical family structure can be turned upside down really quickly with deployment. Same thing for the woman. They can be deployed, and now thinking about this, really interesting statistic, husbands of military women are more likely to also have military experience. So you are more likely, if you are a woman that's in the military, to marry a man that's in the military. Then if you are a man that's in the military, it's more likely that you will marry a woman that has not been in the military. Really interesting statistic there. Dual military concepts. So this is both parental figures are actively involved in the military. They could be deployed at different times, but they also could not be. It could overlap. There has to be some type of care plan put in place so that if both parents are deployed at the same time, that we know who will be taking care of the children. So, and then we also have families in National Guard and reserves. So these are more specific groups that are focusing on disasters and restoration. And reserves can be from any branch of the military, and they'll be mobilized when the need arises. And this can be a struggle. It's less demanding because you're not just going to be pulled out for year-long contracts. Like this could be a few months, this could be a weekend, this could be a few days, but you're not prepared for this. I mean, when we have a natural disaster or if there's a disaster in our country, and and there's restoration processes that need to take place, we're not really prepared for that. So joining the National Guard and Reserve, there's a lot of flexibility that has to be had with the family and the person that's going to then be deployed. The issues that face children, the average military child can move between 6 and 9 times before high school graduation. Every single time you enter a new school, you have to go through that socialization process again. You have to go through explaining yourself, creating new connections. My husband and I, we just had this kind of conversation the other day about how as adults, when you move, especially like we just moved across the country, we're like, how do adults go out and like make friends? Like, what activities and things can you do to like meet people? Because again, like as a child is moving 6 to 9 times, if they're potentially in a military family, like they now have to like restart the activities, redo all the things, like they're going through that exact same process. Now, of course, being in school is very helpful to that fact. But just thinking about that socialization process, whether you're a child or an adult, is always really difficult. Some families can move in with relatives when a parent is deployed, meaning there's another move. And additionally, then if you have a new family member that's entering kind of your main hub, that could potentially cause tension, change in routine, difficult transitions for children. Absolutely. Military children fare better in peacetime than civilian children. So interesting, like if they're not at war and their family, like everyone's at home, those children that have family with military backgrounds are more likely to be respectful of authority figures, more tolerant, adaptable, responsible, and welcoming of challenges. So these are like absolutely the most positive attributes of children that are involved in the military system by family choice. So when they're not going through that social trauma of where is my parent, I hope they're okay every day, they tend to be super respectful, adaptable, and responsible. Military values can help build resilience and continue talking about different relocation options positively can also benefit the child. Let me say that sentence one more time. So military values, they can help children build resiliency. So moving back and forth all the time, new family members, you become resilient. And then again, talking about relocation positively. So, oh, when we move to the city, here's a new opportunity you're going to have. It can benefit the child as well. The 4 different phases of deployment. So there's pre-deployment. This is the time when the family member gets the notification that they're going to be deployed to when they actually go. This to me is like an anxious waiting period because you know that there's a big change about to happen. A child knows this. They see packing, they see planning, they see prepping, and it's a lot of anticipation. There's a lot of research done, especially for kids, that it is better to leave a situation angry than it is sad. Because if you leave sad, you're showing your full heart. All your emotions are on the table. You're extremely vulnerable. Versus if you're angry, it feels like you have more control over the situation. And so a lot of times children will react very angry, with very anger-filled emotions instead of the sadness, even though they very much so love that family member, just because that's the only way that they feel like they can get control of the situation. Deployment is the time when the person is gone. The reunion is the period of preparation just before the return. And then the post-deployment is the period after the return. Many people think deployment is the most difficult. There are extreme stresses to each stage. Personally, I feel like pre-deployment and post-deployment can be the most difficult, especially for a child who thrives on routines. Knowing that your routine is about to change is just such an intense anxiety. And then putting that other person back into the equation, there's such a high expectation that you should be so joyful, that everything should go back to normal, that can create a lot of issues as well. Children and youth may feel ambivalent to a returning parent. If a parent is different from any sort of injury, children might also need to help figure out who that new person is. So maybe a parent comes back and it's not that big of a deal. And the parent is expecting a great post-deployment reunion, this meeting with their child. And their child is just kind of guarded themselves. They didn't know what was going to happen to the parent. And so it was easier to take a step away from the situation than to be fully emotionally involved. And then again, like if your parent's coming home and they're missing a limb or there's some serious difference, they have to now figure out what does their relationship look like. And then again, think about all the baggage that that parent is now bringing into the household. And again, the stress that the other parent feels or the caregivers will automatically also contribute to the child's stress as well. Other issues, education. So children whose parents are deployed or frequently move have increased anxiety, anger, fear, sleep difficulty, depression, and crying. Again, a lot of that is just the unknown. They don't know where that other parent is. And the lack of stability is really difficult. Children can act out. Learning requires energy that their mind and body has already used just to manage the above symptoms. So even if a child isn't acting out, but maybe they're struggling academically or even socially, just with friends, things like that, emotionally, it's probably because they're using all of their energy to maintain the above symptoms. Different teaching schedules and policies and resources at every school. So every time a child moves, they have to relearn the entire school. And maybe they need more attention than peers. And that could be because they're constantly moving, maybe because their parent is gone, so they're not receiving the attention that they desire from that family member. Sometimes there's a spillover of violence. So family violence is 2 to 5 times greater than civilian families. Again, war and being in the military really changes your brain. We talked about some positive attributes, but obviously there's a significant amount of negative things that can happen to your brain just by witnessing so much violence. Service members are young and isolated from other families. Wives are financially dependent on the deployed male. Military families tend to be young and sometimes emotionally immature. Again, a lot of the reason why people are joining the military is because they seek that stability. They seek the routine to help lead them to emotional, physical, mental, full regulation. And so a lot of the people that are joining this are fresh out of high school and young families that again maybe they're in that isolating period. They're financially dependent on the person that's being deployed. That can lead to a lot of anxiety and stress, which can then also spill over to violence. Service members with combat-related injuries are more likely to use alcohol or substances. Financial issues. So the youth may not learn how to handle finances. An interesting one, again, just because the military takes care of families. And so maybe the kids just aren't learning those financial practices. Same thing with if a person is going into the military right after high school, they're going to lack some of those basic financial skills when they come out. Again, that provision of housing, uniform, medical care, etc., it doesn't mean that the service members know actually how to manage that money. And appeals for disability are not always approved. It can take months. So when you leave the military, it's difficult to receive the services that you need to recover from the military. Strength-based approach. So when you are dealing with a child that fits any of the previously mentioned categories, we need to think about the things that they are bringing to the table that are really unique and positive. There's already a built-in support where families are living on bases. So even if a parent is away and they're deployed, if the family's living on base, they're now supported by many other families that are going through similar things. There is predictability, knowing that they will be relocated. So predictability and unpredictability, if that makes sense. Like they know that they're going to be moved, and so it's not going to come as this big surprise. Oftentimes, military families are really creative in finding different services and meeting their family needs. They have a more acute awareness of diversity, and they can demonstrate a lot of resiliency. So these are great things just to keep in mind when working with children and families that are involved in the military. Typically, there's a lot of camaraderie, a lot of familial support. And again, like predictability and unpredictability, like they know that they're going to face things that they're not predicting, that they're not necessarily planning for, but because they already know that, they're planning to not know, if that makes sense. Okay, so some settings where you can come in contact with military families, basically anywhere. child guidance services, family service agencies, child protective services, battered women's shelters, school social work, VA hospitals, agencies that are specializing in TBI or PTSD, prison, rehab, agencies that work with people who are experiencing homelessness, and agencies that are helping with financial concerns. Military families, they are all over the spectrum on services and things that they're going to need. And just because they fit in that category doesn't mean that they're always going to be, it doesn't mean there's always going to be PTSD. Doesn't mean that they're always going to be with CPS or family service. No. So each one is unique and individualized. It's more so just understanding a comparable history and a pretty typical background from a military family. It's more so understanding the background. Prepare yourself in the following ways. So becoming familiar with military life and jargon, which we've talked a lot about through this PowerPoint, assessing and understanding your own attitudes and prejudice. So this is a really, really important thing. People feel really strongly about the military. A lot of people are extremely pro-military. A lot of people are on the opposite side. Understanding how you feel about it and why you feel that way. Are you living in a family where it's been tradition that people are always serving in the military? Are you living in a different type of family where people are significantly against violence, against war? Understanding where you stand, no matter where that is, and then identifying bias and prejudice that you're bringing in based on your personal opinion. You could meet someone, excuse me, who's on the far end of that spectrum, and they still deserve your care and your understanding when you're working with them, no matter what their belief is on that topic. And so you need to understand where you are and be able to kind of come to a holistic understanding of the topic so that if you are interacting with someone who has this experience, you can still serve them in the best way. Consider how you feel about things like honor and working for the higher good. Consider your concept of death and what it means to you. Become aware of issues that affect military families. Actively develop and practice sensitive strategies, and consider how you can create a safe environment. Again, understanding and knowing that a high amount of people who are going to need services after the military are going to be cases of TBI, PTSD, and just needing counseling services. And so understanding why they have those incidences and then researching specifically about your particular client or child and understanding, okay, if their parent has this, what are some signs that maybe they're struggling to work with that at home, or they need a family counseling where they need to learn how to communicate, or they need to learn what the new routine or the new boundary is going to be. So that's our last slide for today. I feel like I talked a lot today. I probably say that every single week, but I hope that you feel a little bit more prepared for the paper. I also hope that you feel like you learned something maybe about the military this week. If you come from a military background, this lesson today probably made a lot of sense to you. I really just want you to think of, if you are encountering a child that has family in this way, you should just be thinking of this information and these things of, wow, here's areas where they could possibly need additional support and help, because being in the military 100% is a sacrifice for the entire family. And so being able to honor that, being thankful for that, but then also being able to be there where they are and helping them where they are for what they need is also really important. So with that, I hope that you guys have a wonderful week this week. All of your stuff will be due on Saturday night. I'm giving that extra day just because this lecture comes out a day late. But have a great week. I hope you enjoy the fall weather. And if you need anything, please let me know. Let's see.